Here we go, a look at the Victrola the 6th motor. It's this one. 1913. Sure enough, we do have a broken spring. Broken mainspring. It snapped the arbor end right here. These springs in these older motors are hooked, they are a pear-shaped hole on both ends of the spring. It hooks on a little stud in the barrel. And another little stud that, let me find it, I'll show you, here on the arbor. That grease-covered mess right there, that's the hook that the other end of the spring hooks into. Somebody's definitely played with this motor in the past. It's just way too clean on the outside. You see all this gook that's inside the spring barrels. That's old black graphite grease. That's just turned dry and flaky. No rust, just dry, flaky grease. Kind of like a paste almost now. There's none of that on the outside at all. None at all. You see the frame is completely clean. All the parts are only on the inside of the springs, which tells me that at some point in the past, probably around the same time that felt was replaced on the turntable, somebody was playing with this. Maybe they were trying to fix the spring, didn't know how. These motors are a little bit more complicated to work on than the ones that would come later, in the later teens, 1916, 17, 18, 15, right in there. In that you do have to deal with some pins, and you have to knock some pins out to get gears off. And they are the type, they aren't the easy ones that have a hook on one end or the other or both ends. So you do have to have a little more experience sometimes to work on these. They don't use a clip to hold down the barrel cover. It is just press fit in there. As you can see, it's just pressed in and it's flush. It holds very well. It's not better or worse than the other system, just different. These are surprisingly, all Victor motors are good, but this one in particular, like the other one I did, really isn't showing any signs of wear. Now this gear right here on the barrel almost always shows some degree of wear on these teeth. Almost always. If you notice this one, really doesn't have any at all. That tells me right there this machine was not played very much. What they did to break the spring, who knows? Maybe they tried to wind it when it was 10 degrees or something, or they overwound it. Don't know. But this gear, look at those teeth. It's starting to come in focus a little bit. They are spotless. There's no signs of wear at all. No degree of wear at all. No lash on that at all. Very, very nice. Usually on these motors, especially later Victor motors, they made them a little beefier. They don't wear quite as noticeably. These ones did, and no sign of wear on it. Which I guess goes with the condition of the case on the outside. The cabinet is very clean on this. It doesn't really show signs of having been used much at all. That's a shame. That somebody would pay an awful lot of money for a machine, and they did for these when they were new, and just didn't seem to have used it very much. So we are going to try to source some springs, see what we can find. I have springs in stock. I don't know if I have ones for these, but I don't have to order them. That's the frame. These older ones were different in they also used a screw to screw directly into the frame. There's no nuts on this. There's no lock nut. There's no regular nut to hold and no felt washer. What these had, I don't know if there's any left on this. They tend to deteriorate. Right there. That is actually a rubber disc. Instead of a felt washer the later Victor motors used, this is a rubber disc, which is easily sourced. It's actually almost the same thickness as a truck inner tube, and that's exactly the kind of material I use to replace it with. I make my own washers, little spacers. They're not really washers. They're anti-vibration spacers. They go on. The other two have totally disintegrated. But look how surprisingly clean that is. There's a little dust and dirt there, yeah, but not the 100 and some odd years of gook that I would expect to be on these motors when they've been lubricated regularly and played many, many, many years and sat around. It's just way, way too clean. You don't see the other one that I did in 1914 had way more grease on it. Took quite a lot of effort to clean that off, but not this one. This is surprisingly clean. No parts missing this time, but did find. Let's see here. Where's that tiny screwdriver I had? Okay. On the governor body, this is the body. It's brass because of Victor. Some of the HMVs actually went to a pot metal body for a while on these. Not the best, because they tend to crack and swell like everything out of pot metal. But this is brass, and you can, and I have, interchanged these with like the HMV 101s and 102 motors, the Model 59 and the other ones they made. What they have right here is a set screw, right here, that little set screw right there. You see a dimple in the shaft right there where that set screw sits in, and you tighten it down. This screw can get loose, and this one was loose. And what can happen is if that shaft starts to move, you lose your speed control. It just goes boom, and that's that. The motor stops. You don't know what happened. You got to take it apart, figure it out. And this shaft is, this one is moving nice and free on there, so that's good. It has to move. The governor body on this end has to move freely on this shaft, but not on this end. So you always want to make sure that screw, little set screw, where did it go? Oh, wrong side. This little set screw is snugged in there good. You don't over tighten it. Can't say that enough. Don't over tighten. This is brass. It's a tiny screw. You can strip it out. You can snap that screw off. You can bugger up the end. So just snug it so it's not moving. Don't over tighten it. You got to be careful on that. You got to get a feel for it. That goes for every screw on this governor body. The ones on the springs, everything. Springs look pretty good on this, actually. Very nice. But that's in keeping with the rest of the motor. Just wasn't used much. You don't see a lot of wear on the brass disc there. Huh. Somebody spent a lot of money and just didn't use it. And this hammer, in case anybody noticed it. A friend of mine found this at a flea market. Somebody put Victrola on there. This is not a tool used in the Victor factory. Highly unlikely anyway. I think somebody made this, probably a collector. For one thing, it was the Victor Talking Machine Company, or Victor. It was never the Victrola Company. The Victrola is the name of one of its products. It is not the name of the company. You know, somebody kind of stuck it together. That's okay. I've added it to my little toolkit. It is a small tack hammer, so it has its uses. So we'll keep that in there anyway. Someone went to the trouble to make it. I'm sure the Victor company had many, many tools like that, but I doubt they put their name on them. You know, they would have just been ordinary tools, basic screwdrivers and hammers and punches and whatever that they would have needed. But that's a look at the springs. This one's not really in bad shape, but unfortunately this one just let go, cracked and snapped. That can happen. Not much you can do about it when it does, except at this point you can replace it. I know that there's people that will re-drill an end on a spring, and you can do that. It is doable, but it's a little more difficult when it's in the middle like this, because you do have to anneal it after you drill it. You know, the end has to be heat annealed, and then you got to reshape it. You know, it becomes quite a project. But the problem you're facing then is you have one spring shorter than the other. So you would actually have to shorten the other spring by the same amount of space. Really not worth the effort when new springs are available. You can get new springs for these. You know, you don't have to rely on cobbling things together like for many years people had to do, because before the internet it wasn't that easy to find parts for these, and if you weren't connected to the hobby very well or making the parts yourselves, you had to do a lot of searching, going to shows, could take years, before you found what you needed. Nowadays, it's 5 minutes on eBay or the internet, and you've got the springs you need. A phone call to any of the parts suppliers, and there are multiple ones out there that sell parts for Victrolas, in this country and abroad. So you can get the pieces. So you don't have to resort to crude methods, but I will have to replace these springs. Unfortunate, but considering that I don't think this machine has that much use, and these springs probably would have been in pretty good shape, spring-wise, tension-wise, they would have been in good shape. They look it. They don't look too limp, let's put it that way. But there you go. I'll clean this all up, go search my supply. Next time you see it, it'll be spinning away in the machine. Oh, and where's the other parts? Yeah, a few other parts.